we speak, nothing has been forthcoming. Absolutely nothing has been forthcoming from that particular stakeholder in support of the allegations that are being raised publicly, more so, and in a very ad hoc manner in this in the polling, in the counting stations. And why I say ad hoc manner? Because there seems to be no thought being given. It is just what whichever side of the bed, perhaps the agent woke up this morning and they come in there because and they make these allegations. Whether and under very few two rubrics. One, the person was out of the jurisdiction and unable to vote, and or the person is dead. What today we saw one instance where an issue was raised about a particular serial number on a particular list. And that list did not have that serial number because the list stopped long before that serial number arose. So it is instances like that that we are grappling with. Bare allegations with no supporting evidence to bolster it. But it's sad that an engagement such as this, and I've heard the aspersions that one member of the delegation sought to cast, particularly on what I come out here and say and what I say in there. But what you had is a delegation, the majority of which engaged in ad hominem attacks on opposition commissioners. You hear it was specifically raised that says Gunraj comes out here and spews untruths to the media. Thankfully, I believe I'm standing before a very competent and diligent media corps, and who asks the hard questions and who does research, and you have the facts at your hand. There are dozens of people who come out here and speak to you every day. So if it is that my narration or account of the occurrences in there are not accurate, there are many facilities available to debunk that. But what was markedly absent from that submission to the commission, and which I raised, is that I have at least one fellow commissioner who comes out here almost in tandem with me, either before or after, and narrates what happens as well. So the public has an opportunity to juxtapose one version against the other and determine what is the reality. But I strive, and it's not me attempting self-aggrandizement. I try at all material times to bring you as fair as possible a report as to the occurrences in there. So the ad hominem attacks were not only leveled against me as an opposition commissioner. Allegations were made against Commissioner Ben and all sorts of things. But that I guess is probably par for the course in this period of lunacy that we are existing. But what was more egregious is that the said delegation cast aspersions on the staff of GECOM, the very staff that they claim to be protecting and thinking about the welfare, etc. of the staff. They stood up there and cast aspersions on the staff. For example, every single anomaly that they, in their mind, have created, they seem to have a penchant for blaming it on the staff. Every single thing from ballots not some ballots not being stamped to improperly stamped ballots, which was a matter that I believe almost every member of the press who covered Elections Day activities would have seen that or would have reported on issues with the stamps. It is probably the most predominant issue that was reported upon. And so all manner of aspersions were cast on the staff, and which I find to be distasteful, which I find to be very distasteful, because what you had 23 to 39 polling stations with at least about 3 or 4 persons in it. You're talking about 10,000 people in some concerted effort to uh, alter the course of an election in a particular way, I think, like I said, the era of lunacy is becoming more apparent. But and then you have then you had the delegation speaking about the order. The order is a public document for the very reason. It was gazetted so that the world will have notice of its contents. There you have, and very silly things being included in there and being questioned. For example, lunch hour for staff, and we were being told that, oh, that was included in the order. Details such as those ought not to be contained in an order for the simple reason that it has to be worked out in here. If we say that lunch is from 12 to 1, and we must stick slavishly to that, our process cannot function properly. So it is, and there is this insistence that we are not following the order. But yet, there is a deliberate attempt now, ongoing. And before I get there, one of the issues that was raised, and this was raised, and I agreed with it. So, where an issue that we find some degree of commonality on, and I've spoken about it here before, and I'm compelled to say that I agree with it, is the variation in instructions and approach by staff day to day and station to station. I agree with that. I heard that complaint being made by the delegation, one particular member of the delegation, and I agree with it. In fact, it is something that I've raised, and it is something that I am grappling with to have resolved every single day at the commission that we meet. But that, in that vein, what we have this afternoon, I believe it is like paragraph 10 of the order. Let me just confirm that so that I don't be labeled as misleading again. Yes, paragraph 10 of the order dated 4th May 2020, which dictates the conduct of this process, speaks to what occurs at the completion of the tabulation of the results for a particular district. Yesterday, you'd recall, well, in fact, prior to yesterday, on Thursday, I've lost track of the days now, I'm just making sure I'm correct here. On Thursday, all but one of the statements of recount for District 1 were concluded tabulating. You'd recall the singular issue in relation to a box that was water-soaked being outstanding. Thankfully, we were able to have the contents of that box dried and retrieved, and the GECOM staff, on observation from the CARICOM observer team, I believe, as well as representatives of the stakeholders, observed the count of that box. It coincided with the statement of poll that was generated from that polling station, and a statement of recount was prepared for it. It was later input or as part of the tabulation process. So, by the close of business yesterday, there was the completion of the tabulation for District 1. Pursuant to the order, one would have expected that the procedures set out in paragraph 10 of the order would have been followed today. What does that require? If I can paraphrase it quickly. It requires that at the completion of the tabulation, that the district coordinator for that district reviews and signs off on that tabulated account, and that tabulated account is circulated to the stakeholders for their acquiescence, and thereafter they are expected to sign off on it as well. And then copies of that district's results will be presented or circulated to all the entitled persons, which includes the stakeholders, which includes the commission, observers, etc. I understand that at the start of the tabulation exercise this afternoon, when that was expected or some clarity or guidance was expected to be produced in that regard, that was not done. That some instruction was brought to the tabulation center by someone who is not the district coordinator for District 1 to say that that will not be done. I have been unable to receive clarity from the chairman or the CEO this afternoon on this issue, but I'm alerting you to the existence of this issue and of my intention to deal with this issue as urgently as possible and as early as possible, because that is a clear deviation from the gazetted order. And lastly, but by no means least, you've had a plethora of persons who have come and speak to you today, all of whom I believe most of whom sit on the COVID-19 task force. None of those persons, either jointly or severally, has indicated to the Guyana Elections Commission, a constitutional body which has made a request to that task force for guidance in relation to the setting up of new workstations, which will lead to greater timeliness and efficiency in this process. Up to now, it has been 2 days and more since the members of that the public health team came and visited, and we are waiting. We are waiting and waiting and waiting, and up to the present time, we have not received that. Like I said to you yesterday, I believe it was Mr. Eliezer who asked me, what was a reasonable time? I thought that 24 hours was more than a reasonable time. And I dare say, I am tempted to make a very cavalier submission to the commission, but which is in keeping with my own views on it, is that we should establish the workstations with or without, because no decision or no advice 48 hours later is tantamount to no decision or refusal. And I believe that we have it within our power to set it up, because we are following more than is expected the COVID-19 guidelines in the polling stations. But this pussyfooting is not unusual, but we've become accustomed to it. We've seen this on inordinate delay in the grant of permission for the Carter Center to come, and then we saw what eventually happened. All I will say at this point is that I hope that the work of the Elections Commission is not fettered by some extraneous authority, and that the Carter Center experience is not mimicked by this request that we have.
Has there been any communication at all between the task force and the commission since the visit?
Not as far as I'm aware, and I've been asking very frequently, and I have an undertaking from the chairman's office that as soon as something is received, anything at all in relation thereto, that I will be notified of it. And as I stand, I have not been notified of anything in that regard.
In the case of persons coming to the media and intentionally misleading, I'd like to ask one thing you pointed out, that you said that no supporting evidence was given in relation to things that would be included in the observation report.
Correct.
Alleged anomalies. But Minister Ali came out and she said that evidence has been supported, particularly today at the meeting. So do you still hold that no evidence?
I hold that. I sat through a meeting that was almost 2 hours long. It started just after 2 o'clock and it ended just before 4 o'clock. And absolutely no evidence was presented at that meeting.
What about at the workstations?
As far as I'm aware, there was 1 or 2 occasions on which an attempt was made to submit information. I narrated to you yesterday, I believe it was when I spoke to you, that I was in one workstation when a document, it appeared to me to be a hastily composed document that included some names and dates, was attempted to be presented. And when questions were asked about whether presenting such a document the uh, to the team who was conducting a recount was permissible. That issue was escalated to the district coordinator, and by the time it was being sorted out, the representative of the AP and UAFC who sought to provide or tender that document quickly, as fast as they produced it, they quickly requested that it be returned, and they secreted it. They said they did not any longer want to supply that document.
So that certificate was tendered?
Not as far as I'm aware. Not as far as I'm aware.
No immigration records? Or
No proof whatsoever. Not as far as I'm aware. And like I said, as you know, I've been here every day. I'm in contact with all of the stations. I walk around, and nothing has been, as far as I'm aware, been presented. Neither has, and I can say this with more clarity, nothing has been presented to the commission level. It is not, nothing has brought, absolutely nothing has been brought to the attention of the commission in that regard.
Was the commission asked to investigate those anomalies by the debts and the immigration?
What was asked, what was requested of the commission is what position we will take in relation to this. I don't believe a formal application has been brought to the commission for investigation of these issues. But in any event, John, none of this is, no evidence, absolutely no evidence has been brought to the commission up to the time that I'm speaking here.
Commissioner Gunraj, the premise of these allegations of irregularity is that it can be conclusively decided whether a particular elector is voted or not. Can you say, based on your understanding of the system, how do you know whether somebody voted or not? Can you conclusively determine that?
No, you can't. The short answer is no.
Commissioner, does persons who are deceased voting concern your political party?
I stand here and I speak to you as a commissioner. There are many
representing a party at the commission.
There are many persons who will come here and give you views on political parties. But let me tell you my views on that as a commissioner. I believe that there are sufficient safeguards in the electoral process that prevents such occurrences. And what are those safeguards? I'll say it for the purposes of emphasis. One, a person, each political party has representatives in polling agents on polling day. Two, each person in a station, starting from the presiding officer to the assistant presiding officer to all the party agents, etc., are provided with a folio. In fact, when we were examining the wet box, I saw a wet folio. I thought of taking a picture and presenting it to you guys for the purposes of showing what a folio is. A folio is almost like you have an ID card, an expanded ID card in front of you. And if in the event that someone is uncertain as to the identity of a person or to the authenticity of a person, they have the ability to ask. But so there are important safeguards that are put in a station, in polling stations to deal with this issue. But more importantly, on March the 2nd, you didn't hear any hullabaloo emanating that, look, you had persons voting that were not supposed to vote or who were not entitled to voting. On March 3rd, April 3rd, May 3rd, no such thing. But when the process has started here, you suddenly hear all of these things being raised. It's just what I started with. It could only be deemed as propaganda and a naked attempt to derail this process.
So it doesn't concern you, to follow up, so it doesn't concern you that though these safeguards are in place, that there may be instances of it happening?
I am saying that it's very unlikely because of the safeguards.
Even if it's very unlikely, but it does happen, it doesn't concern you as a commissioner?
I will wish not to comment on it unless conclusive proof is provided in that regard.
So would you want it to be investigated to know for sure that this does not happen?
There is nothing to investigate, sir, because at this point, Absolutely nothing has been presented to me except bare, naked allegations. That's it. That's it.
If we could address perhaps irregularities that we all can see. We have had verified that in some ballot boxes there are missing poll books. We've had verified that certain records of ballots that should be within the ballot boxes are not there. We have
Let me seek some clarification. The second issue. I'll deal with the poll books issue in a second. That missing ballots are not there.
No. The PE, I can't remember the particular envelope. Basically, the record of the number of ballots that would be issued was actually found to be missing in one of the Region 5 boxes.
That's okay. I'll address that.
So we have those things that are being verified. We have one party that's claiming that even if it's one person who is alleged to have been dead and we see that this person is supposed to have cast a vote, it's important. We have another party that's saying that we need statistical significance. Is there a policy at the level of the commission as to what constitutes something that would trigger investigation? What threshold do we have to reach with irregularities for there to be an investigation or concern?
So I'll answer you from the back coming forward. There's no position that the commission has not taken a position on that. However, I believe it is the understanding of this entire process that the results emanating from the recount shall be the results of the elections. And just before coming out, I was trying to put my hands on a copy of the aid memoir that triggered this entire process to refresh what it says on that. But I'll deal with that subsequently. But let me deal with this issue about missing poll books, etc. There seems to be a lot of misconceptions surrounding this, specifically the missing poll books. On the first day that I heard about missing poll books, it sounded very attractively alarming to me. But a simple clarification from the chief elections officer allayed the fears that were associated with that alarm. What did he say? He said there are two things that go out when as part of a polling station package. You have sensitive material and non-sensitive material. Sensitive material is packed under scrutiny by all the political parties, by representatives of GECOM. Commissioners sometimes go and look and see, ensure there's a paper trail in relation to the issue of ballots, paper trail in relation to the issue of statements of poll, blank documents, tendered ballots, all of that. Even the ink is properly protected in there. The last document that is put in there, or the last documents that are put in there, at least in the last elections, were the official list of electors and the folios, because we have taken a decision that in relation to the folios, which resulted in a delay in those going in there. On the other side, you have the non-sensitive bag, which has everything from the voting compartment, pencils, a lamp, batteries, and I mention batteries specifically because you know why. All of those other things. At the end of the poll, and there's a count, oftentimes, and we've seen this happen with every single election, some of the items that are supposed to be put in the sensitive box, because it's returned just like that, sensitive or non-sensitive. Some of the items that are supposed to be put in the sensitive box sometimes end up in the non-sensitive box. And it seems to me that, and the CEO did not find this irregular, that the majority of the poll books were put in the non-sensitive. What we have here are boxes that are the sensitive alone. So it's no big issue that the poll books are miraculously missing and there's some big secrecy and so on in relation to that. You'd also recall, and I'm on this issue, and you'd understand why it is not such a big issue. It is something that occurs from time to time. You'd recall that immediately after the March 2nd elections, I think on the 3rd or 4th, that the actual statement of poll for 1 or 2 stations were all which supposed to have come to the CEO and the returning officer were actually locked in the box as well. So you have these anomalies which do not necessarily affect the outcome of the process. That's the reality. But this process is being conducted by human beings. 2339 human beings are in charge of 2339 various stations. So there must be some sort of variation across the board. So it's not, for me, it's not very alarming. And in relation to that specific box that you spoke about in region 5, I think 5006 or something like that is the box number. What you had in the box is only ballots. You only had ballots in the box, and all the other material, I presume, would have found its way into the... actually, you know what? What they see, the clarification that the CEO offered, and is that this part of the non-sensitive includes the 2 envelopes, one for the CEO and one for the RO. And it is expected that with that package for the RO, well, it's both go to the RO and then the RO sends to the CEO. That RO package, as they call it, the poll book usually goes there. So they're trading, the GECOM's trading, which is open to commissioners, which is open to stakeholders. That's part of the trading. So I don't know now, 2.5 months later, why a big hue and a cry is being made about this, when in my mind it's immaterial. It does not affect the outcome of the elections.
So would you establish that as a threshold, as it has to affect the outcome of the elections to matter?
I have not established that as a threshold. Courts have established that as a threshold. And why I'm mentioning that's a threshold as established by the courts? Because they have established that threshold, and they are the court is the legal authority tasked or the legal authority with the ability and wherewithal to inquire into that. I respectfully submit that it's not GECOM that has that responsibility. GECOM does not have that responsibility. It does not.
Mr. Barrage, as a commissioner sitting on the commission, and given what you have seen throughout this election process up until this time, would you agree with your fellow commissioner, Mr. Vincent Alexander, that there needs to be a revamping of the electoral system?
You could always aspire for better. You can always aspire for better. But, you know what? Everyone agreed to and subjected themselves to this electoral process. They agreed that these are the rules by which we will play, and these are the outcomes that we will expect. You can't be in the on the field and then expect to change the rules. I come out here with certain rules that I will speak to you, and I expect answers. I can't midway through decide, you know what, I don't like what it is, and run away, because that's not what the rules of engagement are. Similarly, the electoral process, well documented, all in law. Representation of the People Act, 15 of 2000, Constitution, everything, properly documented. What has to be done? Everyone knows the rules. But you can't, when the rules do not yield the result that you as an individual or a party desires, that you change those rules, you openly flout the law, you question the rules, etc. Can be done. Perhaps, the short answer to you is yes. I would like to see changes too, but you can't change it. You can't change it when the process is ongoing. Perhaps after. Right.
Had the task force initially provided a timeline for a response?
I believe the understanding at the time of the visit was that we will have that response by lunch the next day. That is the understanding that I left the visit with. We have had 2 lunches since and no such report.
Didn't explicitly say we will respond tomorrow, we'll provide a report tomorrow. How did you get the understanding that we will provide a report one day after?
That was communicated to us, that look, you'll hear from us by lunch tomorrow. And in fact, the commission scheduled its meeting. The commission schedules its meeting in keeping with that. And as you know, we've not had a meeting to discuss those issues because we've not had that report. And in any event, Kumar, the question I want to ask is, in this process that is being conducted here, of enough importance to warrant a report being presented to us in as short a possible time? I keep saying this, and this is as important as the pandemic that we're suffering, because it's like a second virus the country is facing.
Will they be raising at the level of the commission for GECOM to go ahead without that report from the task force?
I said earlier on, maybe I hold a cavalier view. And I hold that view because I don't believe GECOM should be fettered by any other authority or person. But it's a suggestion I certainly will make at the commission level once we get around to discussing it, hopefully tomorrow.
And the decision on the increase of the workstation will also determine if there should be an increase in the 25 days.
Certainly.
On the completion of Region 1, Vincent Alexander, your colleague, had said that after the completion of the district, the party would probably meet to discuss the observations. Has he requested such a meeting?
No, he has not.
Or does the commission have to meet to discuss anything in relation to the completion of that district?
No. One, to answer your first question, no such request has been made. 2, if you look at the order, there is no such provision in the order.
So he had said that one big declaration would be made instead of separate declarations for each region. Is that also your understanding?
What the tabulation of individual regions is catered for in section 10, and what happens after the tabulation is catered for in paragraph 9, and what happens after the signing off, etc., is catered for in paragraph 10. And like I said earlier on, that is not being done today, and my curiosity is certainly aroused in relation as to why we're not following the order. And it's something that I'll raise very urgently.
Forgive me if I don't remember those specific provisions. What did they say in relation to making one declaration?
It's what I said earlier on about the signing off, the publication, the publication or publicizing of the record. At the end of it, all of it comes to the commission. I don't, as I stand here, want to pronounce with clarity or with certainty on declaration or otherwise. But my understanding is that once it is counted, that is the result of the region. You can't move from that. So that is the result. Whether you call it a declaration, whatever you call it, that is the result of the region. And it is my understanding that is the collectania of 10 of those that will be the results of the election.
So you account for these specific differences of 20 votes dropped for the PPP and 4 votes gained for the coalition?
Very, very simple. Very simple. And you see them happening. In fact, I fondly refer to this basket of issues that we have developed. what may, and I just spoke as well about 2339 different persons and their opinions or their training or application of the rules. What you've had happening sometimes is a ballot that might have been considered rejected is changed or is no longer considered rejected because of a review in the station level, at the district coordinator level, at the CEO level, or one occasion even at the commission level. So what you'd have had are some of those changes. And not because you see a change of 20 or add or minus 20 means that would have been the only instances. In many of the instances that arise, you would have seen a change, an increase or a decrease, and what is reflected here is the net change. But it's so minuscule that it's not really an issue. It's catered for. It's understood that would have happened.
I know that Lawrence came in her capacity as a member of the party, but did anyone specifically ask about a response from the task force?
No.
Okay. We have Bassett Williams, the Attorney General, questioning the legality of the recount in a sense, and whether a result can be utilized based on what comes out of this recount. Do you see any merit in the argument that he made here?
No, I don't.
Okay.
No, I don't.
Thank you.
You're welcome.